Hello, this is Mr. Athrall. Just want to talk a little bit about the Prelude by William Wordsworth. Talk about three quotes that will be good ones to memorise and discuss in terms of the upcoming exam. Also talk a tiny little bit about context as well, so that we can understand who William Wordsworth was and where he was coming from. So William Wordsworth is a romantic poet. So we've already spoken in a previous video about William Blake and Percy Bysshe Shelley being romantic poets. He also is a romantic poet. This poem is one all about nature and the glory of nature. So romanticists and romantic poets worshipped and loved nature and thought it was more powerful than man. And so we get that in some of the other poems, and we get it massively in here. So the Prelude is a massive old poem that William Wordsworth wrote, and this is just a small extract of it. The full-length poem is 400 pages long. So thankfully we're only getting a little bit of it rather than the whole thing. So it starts, in terms of what happens in the poem, William Wordsworth steals a boat, goes sailing on his boat, he's having a good old time, and then he is awestruck by the power of nature. And when he sees nature, and he sees this mountain in all of its glory, he fears it, and it troubles him as a result. And so by the end of the poem, when he's come back home, he's sitting around troubled by what he's witnessed. I think it's quite a hard one to discuss in terms of the poems, but it may be the one that's printed, and so you may have to discuss the Prelude. So the first chunk of the poem is him still in the boat and going on a journey. I think it really gets going, and in terms of the quotes to remember and to analyse, when the mountain suddenly appears in all its force. So the first quote is, "Upreared its head." So this is where the mountain is given human qualities. So personification is used by Wordsworth to emphasise the importance and the value of this. This isn't just a thing, an object to be kind of, oh look, there's a mountain. This is a powerful force, as romantics believed it was. And so he uses personification at this moment. Upreared is a particularly powerful verb and quite a threatening one in terms of what he's experiencing at this moment. It also ends with a caesura, so you get upreared its head and then a caesura in the middle of that line, so it's worth remembering that it ends with that caesura. There's kind of a moment of realisation. It upreared its head and suddenly he is in awe of this mountain, and the caesura marks that kind of momentary pause as he sits there in his boat, fearful of this mountain. So then it carries on with the description, and the next quote again is a description of the mountain. It describes the grim shape towered up between me and the stars. So a similar kind of meaning as the other one in terms of the power of nature, in terms of its intensity. This one has got the interesting detail that the shape was between him and the stars. So those stars, we can consider them as maybe being symbolic of something. So the stars as being kind of the peaceful, joyous experience that he was having. He was seeing the world kind of without nature at that moment. Then suddenly nature bursts in, and it's the only thing he can see. It stops him from seeing the stars. So that's kind of the hugeness of it. The horizon is blotted out by this mountain, so the hugeness of it is emphasised. There's lots of personification that continues through the poem from this point. It talks about striding after him, but then we get to the moment where he gets home, and how is his mind affected by what he's just witnessed. So one of the quotes describes, says, "There hung a darkness." So the imagery of light is used to show the depression that he feels at that moment. A darkness is there. That's a kind of emotional state that's used through light imagery, and the verb hung as well is a verb that kind of just has miserable connotations. That it's just kind of lingering there. He can't get rid of this feeling. And the feeling that he's experiencing essentially is that he is tiny and insignificant and meaningless in comparison to nature. And that's a miserable feeling for William Wordsworth.